Thank you. I'd actually like to begin my contribution by congratulating the newest member of the Parliament of Victoria, Nicole Werner, yet to be recognised by the VEC, but that shouldn't surprise us, given how inefficient we know the VEC are. They're my good friends. I'm sure they'll get around to it in good time. Nonetheless, to Nicole, congratulations. I cannot wait to have her in this place and in the other chamber. I was there in Warrandyte, which is also my seat in the electorate that I serve, on the night of Nicole's win. Joyous event, great win. I didn't see the... Well, the other side interject and say one-horse race. They're absolutely right, in the sense that there wasn't a candidate from the Labor Party. So I'm happy to take that interjection up. In fact, I've been wanting to talk about this for quite some time, so I thank you for the interjection. I implore the members of the Labor Party, the good rank and file members of the Victorian Labor Party, perhaps next time they might want to actually have a candidate. I know that they have some voters, not many in Warrandyte, but even I feel for them. And I'm very sympathetic to their desire to at least have their democratic place. I mean, the very fact we had so few, actually such a large proportion of people not vote at all, demonstrates to me that perhaps the Labor voters had absolutely nowhere to go, the poor things. I mean, what were they going to do? When their own party abandons them? Yeah, well, the VEC, we can't rely on the VEC for anything. I mean, they didn't even inform the Victorian people. There was I'm coming to the Commonwealth Games. I'm just warming up. I'm coming to the Commonwealth Games. But you've taken me off. You've taken me off track. What with the VEC and the absence of a Labor candidate in Warrandyte, which again I find ghastly. I just find it the antithesis of democracy. The fact that you've just got at your national conference the opportunity to represent your own people, to represent and select your own candidates, and they've run away from that opportunity. It's extraordinary. And all of those opposite me sat there while their own party decided not to field a candidate. Anyway, I will go back to the motion we're debating, notwithstanding the fact that I do have great sympathy for the rank and file members of the Labor Party in this occasion, because of course they didn't even have a candidate, because their party didn't have the guts or the gumption to put one forward. I was there, as I was saying, in Warrandyte to congratulate Nicole, and of course that evening there are very many questions that are being put to me by members of the local community, very many questions, that is, in regards to the Commonwealth Games. And in particular, today is a great opportunity to put some of those questions to the Premier himself through this contribution. And one of those questions was, does Premier Andrews truly care for hospitals and schools? Now, to be fair, it's a somewhat rhetoric question, because we know the short answer is no. That's quite short. Why do we know that? Well, we know that because he's just literally blown $380 million at least, as a minimum. This is somebody who, walking as they talk, does have no regard for the fact that $380 million can just be literally thrown down the drain. It is unbelievable. Victorian Premier Daniel Andrews presented withdrawing from the Commonwealth Games contract. This is, let's not forget, a bid that they put in for this voluntarily as a prudent decision. In his word, he didn't want, no one wanted this thing to cost $5 billion, $6 billion, $7 billion, he remarked. And he said he was not going to apologise for not taking, and I quote, not taking money out of hospitals and schools. Really? Not taking money out of hospitals and schools? $380 million? There's a lot of schools I know in our electorate, Dr. Bark, who would absolutely appreciate that money. They're trying to scrounge together as we're speaking to try and facilitate school camps. It's a lot of school camps for $380 million. My goodness, we could send them all overseas at that expense. Only prudence, as this chamber knows, and any Victorian worth half their salt knows, prudence lies in doing your due diligence before you bid for a job and not after. I mean, it's not a complicated concept, let's face it. Unfortunately, the Victorians are left to pick up the tab. I mean, it's literally like you've had a runner. You've gone to the restaurant, you've had a beautiful meal, but no one wants to pay for it, and everyone else gets up and runs. That's everyone from the Labor Party. And my poor colleague here, Mrs MacArthur, is left there with a cheque in her hand for $380 million and nothing to show for it. So she turns to her people in Ballarat and Geelong and Warrnambool and Terang and Portland, and she has nothing to show of that. She's just got a bill in her hand. It's quite unfortunate. When asked about these woefully inadequate estimates, the Premier, as is his habit, pointed elsewhere. He blamed everyone else. It's great. It's a goodie, but it's an oldie. I think it's probably wearing thin for this government at this point. But he blamed, of course, the officials and the consultants. And they're the ones who apparently, because we actually don't know if this is a fact. There are no facts in this debate other than, well, I don't even know that the $380 million figure is a fact either, because there's a gag order. I mean, this is one of the ironies, the great ironies. It seems to me that the Premier knew very well that when he said he would provide all these details later once the negotiations had concluded, that of course he also knew that he'd make sure there was a gag order to make sure that they would never actually have to do that. It was not so much mastery as just trickery, I think. because to say it's mastery would be craven. To deny the Victorian people the right to scrutinise, to deny the Victorian people the right to know what was negotiated, the true extent of the actual bill. We're told, and I don't believe that it's only $380 million, it is probably well in excess of that, because we also have to recall that when the Premier was discussing these matters early on, he was really referring to the major contracts. He made this differential in his language, which he often does, and I have to get better at catching him out on this when we have him next time at PAC, because I think maybe I didn't do quite good enough a job, because reality is there are small and medium contracts as well. So to what extent are we exposed to those contracts? To what extent do we have liabilities there as well? There's no doubt in my mind that the bill for this will continue to grow over time, and in all honesty, I don't think until there's a change of government, any Victorian will ever know the true cost of this decision to axe the Commonwealth Games. And I want to pick up on an interjection that was made earlier on, because it just took me back in time, and it was an irony, to say the least. I recall very well when those opposite in government were claiming that Matthew Guy, the then leader of the opposition, would axe the Commonwealth Games. There's still the tile that they used in social media with great enthusiasm and fanfare, and, you know, this is what Matt Guy's going to do, he's going to kill the Commonwealth Games. So then, lo and behold, some months later, for Labor to do that to their own games themselves was not only ironic, you know, even the most twisted scriptwriter from Yes Minister, Yes Prime Minister, Veep, in the thick of it, not even those guys and girls could come up with something so comical, so twisted, so perverted, that in actual fact, the very thing you've accused those opposite of, you do yourself. In fact, it was almost like there was this sort of sense of projecting. I mean, that really was the last campaign in its entirety. Let's project. So they labelled Matt Guy the cuts guy. Of course, when they were the very first budget back into government, what do? They cut everything. So, I mean, the next campaign, Victorians should be well aware that whatever Labor's saying, it's probably a good projection upon what they plan to do themselves. Yes, I know. It's almost Mr. Smithers-like, isn't it? It conjures those. Mr. Smithers, we'll introduce him to this debate. We've got a few other people, so we'll bring Mr. Smithers and his will come to the nuclear debate. I've got plenty of time for that on Thursday, and I'm looking forward to that. But back to these consultants that the Premier has blamed. Well, who hired these consultants and the officials? Well, his government, of course, the Labor government. Who reviewed the estimates and came up with them? Oh, yeah, that's right. It's his government. Yeah, same people. Oops, sorry about that. Who decided at that point in time the estimates were reliable? Oh, yeah, that's right. It's their government as well. Oh, God, this is getting good, isn't it? There's a theme. There's a theme created here. I mean, I almost can't keep track with how often they sort of pose their own question, then answer it, or pose a question, answer it, and then say that actually that was not the question in the first place, this is another question. They lose me, they lose Victorians in a myriad of words and wordplay, such that we're all left wondering, well, we're all left like my poor colleague here, Mrs MacArthur, holding the cheque for $380 million at his restaurant table while everyone else has run away. It's a very nasty feeling. I mean, the meal tasted fantastic.
Outside the tram tracks, bereft.
Everyone is bereft. But I realise here that I've taken up way too much time on a debate, because I've only got to the one question that the good folk of Wyandotte were asking me when I was at the victory party for Nicole Werner. She stood in the seat of Wyandotte. Mrs McCarthy, you weren't there for the introduction of my speech, but that was...
Where was the Labor Party?
Well, we've covered this, but just for the sake of comprehensiveness, they failed to field a candidate at all. They failed to...
They didn't turn up.
They failed to turn up. Now, I do have some references to the monarchy, and I will come back to the motion itself, because I do think this is an important... As much as this... As much as I like to indulge those opposite in their whimsical sort of take on this motion, and Mr Galea, I know that you had some commentary about barbs before and those coming your way, but I know you sledged a few this way as well in respect to the actual motion itself, and I think it's a fine motion, I've got to say. I think it's quite well put. It was some thorough thought went into this. And one of my greatest disappointments, I have to get this in the 30 seconds I have left, and I've said this across the chamber, I do want to know what the mascots were. I want to know their names. I want to know how much we paid for them. They were never revealed. I think you owe it to the Victorian people to come clean on that and let us know what they are. And while I'd say that in jest, the reality is there's no doubt whatever those mascots are, they cost millions. Millions. I don't know whether there's a truckload or boatload full of them right now in some overseas country. There probably is. And they're probably crying to get out. We're all crying. It's unfortunately what happens here in Victoria today.
Thank you, Mr McGowan. Your time has expired.